Going live. Hey everybody, and welcome to another network session with Core Code. I am Sofia. I'm from Guatemala. If you're new here, I want to welcome you. We are a technology learning accelerator and a hiring facilitator. Currently, we are working with Latin American talent so they can keep learning and landing jobs at a more efficient pace. How do we do that? We work in alliance with technology companies so we can design market-based programs, and so these companies can hire talent that actually meets their needs. Apart from that, we have a YouTube open community in which we gather with tech experts from around the world so we can all stay updated in ideas and technologies. So if you would like to be part of that community, don't forget to subscribe down there below. That being said, I want to pass the mic to our host and facilitator of the night, and then we can jump into the main presentation of the night. Welcome, guys.
Well, thank you, Sophia.
Hi. Wow, this is amazing. It's a pleasure being here in this network session. My name is Freddy Marroquin, and I am a participant of Core Code Intensive Program and CTO of Real Software Solution. Well, this is awesome. Joseph.
Well, hey, hi. Well, thank you, Freddy. My name is Joseph. I'm a software developer engineer. I am a teach lead at Core Code. And tonight, I have the pleasure to introduce you to the best part of the night. So you have a welcome, Cassidy. Thank you.
Hello, hola, hello everybody. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. For those who don't know who I am, I'm Cassidy. You might know me as Cassidy on Twitter or other social media things. And I'm a principal developer experience engineer at Netlify. I'm really excited to be here today.
Awesome. I have a question.
Awesome.
Do you have a presentation that you want to share with us?
I do, and I will share my screen so we can do that.
Awesome. Yeah. So before or while Cassidy's sharing her screen, I just want to remind you all that this is an open conversation, so you can just ask anything in the chat. We're going to be bringing your comments, questions, suggestions, anything you'd like to share up on the screen after Cassidy's presentation, so we can all enrich this conversation. And for that, I'm going to say bye to Joseph and Freddy. Bye. And I'm going to I'm gonna accompany Cassidy for a while. And yeah, how's your day? I think you were running, right? Were you in another?
I was running, yes. So this is my first vacation I've taken in a long time, and so I was having dinner with some family right before this, and it was a good time.
I was like, you're gonna get back to your dinner soon, I promise.
Oh no, I finished it. I was just like, okay, I'm done. I've got to go see Core Code now.
No, it's cool. That's cool. It's always good to make time for family, right?
Yes.
That's something important we always talk about in Core Code. Actually, we're called Core Code because we're always thinking not only about the code, but also about the core part of learning, of being, of existing, of participating. That's a good thing to remember. Thank you, Cassidy.
Yes. Great. Well, I am ready to share my screen. That being said, it told me that I need to turn my camera off and back on again, and so I'm going to just do that. It might egg me out there, so sorry about that, but I will then share my screen. So 1 second.
It's cool. It's
okay.
Yeah, she left. there she comes. Yeah, there you are. Hi again.
I don't know why it made me do that, but it works now.
Ooh,
okay, great. And so here are my slides here. Can you see them? Great.
Awesome. There we are. So I'm gonna leave you in stage so you can enjoy your slides, and we're gonna come here soon. Don't worry. See you.
Great. Okay, well, hello everybody. And so I've already introduced myself, so I don't need to do that part again, but this is an introduction to Next.js. And this is a framework that I've been using a lot. I've used it quite a bit, especially over the last year in the pandemic. And I'm just going to kind of tell you the basics of it, and then I'll dive into a little bit of code as well, so that way we can go through all of it and see how a Next.js application is structured. So first of all, at the very beginning of everything, why Next.js? Why would I use Next.js? And I'll start with a little bit of history. Next.js began to be a React framework to server-side render routes. And I'll dive into that a little bit more. With React, typically if you're using a regular React application, create React app or something, you're client-side rendering everything. And so if you want something to change on the page, the JavaScript that is running client-side. It's running on your user's browser. With Next.js, you're allowed to write server-side rendered React, and so you can still have your React components and everything, but it's built on the server rather than in the user's browser. And so it's better for servers, it's better for SEO, search engine optimization, and it's speedy as well. And so that's where Next.js began. Now, last year, a little over a year ago now, and Next 9.3, Next started to take a bit more of a shift towards static site generation as well, where it supported it before, but then it really made a big splash to be more static first. And so with static sites, instead of having all of your code run in the user's browser, instead of having all of your code run server side, your code runs at build time instead of at runtime. And so it's a timing thing, where with server side and with client side, you're running things when the user requests it. At build time, you're running the code when you create the site, and then the user just gets a built page. And that is really, really powerful, because when you do things static first, then everything runs that much faster, because you don't need JavaScript to load the page, it already runs. You don't need JavaScript to run to be search engine optimized, because it's already built. And so it's a really, really great way to scale up your websites. And then you can add client-side JavaScript, you can add server-side and server JavaScript or whatever language you want to your sites after that. But if you're static first, then you're much more optimized for the long run. And so that's kind of why one might use Next.js and use it for various projects and larger applications. Now, there's quite a few features that you can know about. I don't even think I'll be able to get through all of them in Next.js in this presentation, but I'll go through a bunch of them, and I'll talk through them both with code and also in the presentation. So first of all, there's a lot of really nice developer experience nice to haves. Next.js was definitely built by developers for developers, and so there's a really nice angle of the framework to make it easy to work with. And so first of all, it has hot code reloading. Now, the hot code reloading, that's something that we've kind of come to expect with a lot of frameworks nowadays, where as you change your code, the browser refreshes and it just loads. But what's nice about the Next.js hot code reloading is it uses React Fast Refresh. And so it maintains the state of your application as you are changing your code. And so, for example, let's just say I am updating a form. If I'm updating a form and I fill out the form and I'm saying, okay, I want to make sure an error appears if I have too many characters here, or something to happen when I make the number too high, I don't know, something like that, and you change the code, typically before React Fast Refresh, that means that you have to fill out the form again. But with React Fast Refresh and all of the updates since then, it now maintains the state of the application. So you don't have to fill in your form again, or you don't have to click a certain number of buttons again to get to a certain point on your page. It just maintains that state, which is really nice and powerful. Another thing that's really, really nice in Next.js are all the styling options. There are so many. Pretty much name a styling option, whether you want to use a preprocessor like Stylus or Less or Sass, or you want to use something like CSS modules or styled JSX as some kind of CSS and JS framework. That is pretty much always built into the framework. You can just use it and it'll work. I personally really like using CSS modules, and truly it's just a matter of making the file names component.module.css, and it just works. And so those styling options out of the box are really, really useful. It also has TypeScript support out of the box, and you don't have to enable any flags or anything for it to work. You just change your file names from .js to .ts, and you're set. It has TypeScript support built in. It also has environment variables as well. And so you can have some environment variables that are private that don't get surfaced to the browser, but then it also has environment variable support to be able to send environment variables to the browser that will be exposed to the user. And so that is really useful, as well as you're building out things that might be using a CMS or certain APIs. In addition to all of these, it also has automatic code splitting. And so with that automatic code splitting, it basically looks at what you're serving the browser, and any unused code that you're not using, it cuts it out. And so it's really, really optimized for efficiency for loading really great pages into the browser and really awesome websites. And so these nice to haves are very great, very powerful, and there's even more. I'm only scratching the surface here, and I'm going to be sharing some code a little bit after this, so that way you can see a little bit more of that, and it should be very fun. Okay. Routing in Next.js is something that is kind of unusual if you're coming from a traditional React background, because you don't set up a router. You don't set up like a routes.js where you have all of your routes defined or anything like that. Next.js uses page-based routing. And so with that page-based routing, if you make an index.js, that is your homepage. It renders an index.html. If you make a contact.js, that'll make a contact page where you could go /contact. All of your routes are just based on making a file inside of a certain directory, and it's done. And there are a lot of pros and cons to that. I won't say it's perfectly awesome. There are some caveats, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. But that being said, it's really, really nice to not have to set up an entire router for your applications if you don't want to. The API for Next.js is great. And so these are the four main ones that I personally use the most. I don't actually use AMP that much, but these are some big ones, but there are others too. But that first one is Next Link. It's a React component that is a link. It wraps an anchor tag so you can link between pages. But what's nice about it is it actually does some preloading, and so it can do client-side transitions between pages. And so you're switching between pages and routes is really nice and zippy. And so that's what Next Link is. Next Head allows you to programmatically update the head of your application. And so, for example, in an HTML document, if you have head and /head inside of those brackets, that's where you can update your title, your meta tags, any scripts that you want to add. Next Head allows you to programmatically change that. And so you could have different variables for your titles, change programmatically, again, your meta tags and any of the content that would normally be in the head tag. And I'll show you some examples of that too. Now, Next Router, that is a React hook, and it's use router. It's a hook for that. And what you can do with that is that lets you redirect between different pages. It lets you get parameters. It lets you get the current path that you're on. It's just a hook for getting details about where your routes are right now. Next AMP allows you to make Google AMP pages. And actually the Google team worked with Next.js, the Next.js development team, to add this. And so you can make AMP optimized pages inside of a blog that you might be writing, any articles or anything. But what's also cool, not just with Next AMP, is that the Google team also added a lot of really interesting performance metrics for Core Web Vitals. And so if you've seen Core Web Vitals, you probably have if you've ever looked at Lighthouse scores whenever you're updating your website. You know, you might want to get 100 for accessibility and 100 for performance and your images and all of that stuff. The Google team worked with them, and so there's actually hooks within Next.js to be able to say, okay, what's the time to first byte? Okay, what's the first contentful paint? All of those different metrics that are included in the Core Web Vitals that Google created is built into this framework. And so AMP, Core Web Vitals, very cool things are built right into Next.js. Now, there are other parts of the API that I mentioned that I won't get as into, but for example, Next Image is something where it allows for some image optimization in the framework. It's definitely very new. I admit I don't use it very much because I'd rather use something like Cloudinary to handle that outside of the framework for me, but it's still pretty cool, and that's built in. And then it also has internationalization built in as well. And that's also newer. I think that was announced this past October, November. And that allows for internationalized routes and being able to have an internationalized site. So that part is really exciting as well. The CLI, the command line interface that's built in with Next.js, is very simple. There's Next Build that builds your site. There's Next Dev that runs a dev server. Next Start, it runs a production server based on Next Build once the site is built. And then Next Export, which exports the site as a completely static serverless application. So these four are the main ones you'll use. Pretty much, I only use Next Dev and Next Build, and then sometimes Next Export. I rarely use Next Start just because the features that I use typically don't require the production server end of it. I can typically run it as static, but you have the option. Now, Next also allows for some custom configuration, and that's in the next.config.js. And so if let's just say you want to add Tailwind, you want to add some kind of specific Sass library or something like that, next.config.js is just a Webpack module. And so you can add whatever loaders, whatever things that you want into next.config.js, and that will load it into your site. And it's pretty powerful to be able to add all kinds of configuration in there. And it's a nice, simple module. Now, preview mode is a really interesting feature. And this one I am getting into, but I won't dive too deep just because we've got a lot to cover. With preview mode, this is a feature that is when it assumes that you build a static website. And so you have a Next.js site that's fully static. Let's just say you have a blog and you're using a CMS with it. So you want to use something like Prismic, like Contentful, like some thing like Sanity, one of those CMSs. And let's just say you have a fully static website, you make a new blog post, and you don't want to wait for your entire site to build before you see what the site will be. Now, typically, if you're doing a blog, your site will probably build really fast. It probably won't take more than a minute, but let's just say you're impatient and you want to see that. With preview mode, what it does is it creates a cookie, and it allows for cookie-based redirects. And what it does under the hood is it queries a serverless function, and you can say, okay, I'm making this new blog post. I don't want to wait for my site to build. It then generates the page, and it kind of server-side renders the page via a serverless function. So you can see what your blog post will look like. You can make sure the content looks all good, and it's built all with the site. And then you can exit out of preview mode and then commit it and build your whole site. And so it's kind of a way of cheating the system of fully static sites where you have to build everything all at once by being able to preview something separately. And it's a really, really powerful feature. I know at Netlify, for example, tons of our customers use it for their blogs and stuff, and it's really, really powerful. Similar to preview mode is incremental static regeneration, and it's similar but different. And I've written a blog post on it, and I'll be sharing a link to that. But incremental static regeneration is something that it assumes that you have a fully static site, but it queries serverless functions, it queries a server, it queries other things to generate pages. And so with preview mode, you're generating one page, you're previewing it, you think it looks good, then you exit and you go about your business building your site. With incremental static regeneration, or ISR, you build your site and you have some pages that aren't defined. And let's just say you have, for example, some core pages, but then other pages could be variable routes. What happens then is those pages are generated separately, and then depending on your host, different hosts actually do this differently. You might have a static page that is added to the build and it's a new static build. You might have that queried with a serverless function and it's rendered that just on that one page. One thing that we're actually doing at Netlify is where we just released something called on-demand builders, where it adds something to a new bundle and caches pages differently. It's a funky feature because all of the different types of hosts that host Next.js build these pages differently. But anyway, it's a very cool feature by being able to have a mostly static site, be able to have atomic and immutable deploys where your site can have all the benefits of static without being limited by it, and being able to add a bunch of features on top of that. So it's a very, very cool feature. Now, all this being said, I'd like to code. And so I'm going to stop sharing just for a second so that way I can switch over to my code editor, and I'm going to show you just some details about how a typical Next.js application might run. Now, there is actually, you know what? I'm going to show you a URL really quick so that way you can know where to go. I have a starter project, and I'm going to show you that starter project URL really quick, just that way you can see the URL. Let me share my screen again. This. And so this is the starter project that I made, cast.run/next-starter. It's on my GitHub, and this is just a base Next.js site. It forks it forks create next app because there is a CLI tool for creating a Next.js application, but it adds a few small nice to haves, and then it also cuts out some of the extra stuff that you might not necessarily need. And so that's the URL that you might need. And I'm going to pull up my code editor so that way you can check that out. And so 1 second, let me make it so you can see everything. I'm going to zoom in on stuff, and then I'm going to share it all with you. Okay, 1 second. Let me make sure that I'm sharing my right page because I just realized I wasn't sharing the right one. And right over here. Okay, great. Sorry about the delay there. It's hard doing everything live. Okay. So when you look at a typical Next.js application,
We're not looking at your screen yet.
I know you're not looking at my screen. Don't worry.
that's cool.
I'm talking before I actually share it.
Sorry,
Okay.
cool.
Thank you for checking though, because you never know. Okay. So when you're looking at a typical Next.js application, it won't look that fancy. It's going to look like a pretty plain screen, and I'm going to show you what that pretty plain screen looks like. And it's not loading, so I'll just show my code. If you go to that cast.run/next-starter, you'll see it. It's pretty much a plain HTML page, and it'll say welcome to my app and get started by editing this pages.index.js. And so I'm going to kind of walk through the code a little bit so you can see all of it. And so inside of this code base, the only directory that really matters is the pages directory. The pages directory is where all your routes live. And so I mentioned that it does page-based routing, Next.js does. We have an app.js and an index.js. Index.js is our home page. If I wanted to make a new page, I could do contact.js, like I mentioned before, and copy all of this code inside of here and rename it contact, and then say contact me. And then if I were to go to this website, if I were to go to the localhost 3000/contact, that would load this whole page. And that's how that works. Okay. And so there's these different pages right here. And then you might be wondering what this app.js is. App.js is something that wraps your entire Next.js application. And this is where there are caveats with the page-based routing. Let's just say that you want to have some global styles in your application. You can import them at this app.js level. And so I have this styles and this globals.css where I have some base styles right here. If you import this at this top level, it will affect every page in this directory. If I wanted to do something, for example, like import some context, and it's from whatever, like this, if I were to have a context object and I wanted to have it release a provider or something, and I wanted to do some context like this, oh, it's ugly code, I'm sorry, and do something like this, put this in here, this would wrap my entire application in a context, in a React context, which is very powerful. That allows you to do a lot of really cool state management. I've actually used some cool stuff with XState to be able to share context in a Next.js application. That being said, you're sharing it with every single page. If you wanted to only share a context object with like 2 routes, unfortunately, you can't do that with Next. You have to do it all or nothing. And so that's where something like, if someone were asking, should I use just create React app or should I use Next.js? If you want to share state across only certain routes and for example, in your React router, wrap context around certain things, that's where you might want to reconsider if you're using Next. But it's a small caveat, it's still cool. You might notice that I have this @ sign right here at styles, and then I also have some of those here with this @ components in this header and footer, which by the way, I made this components folder. The header is very simple, it's an H1. The footer is also very simple, but it also uses CSS modules like I mentioned earlier, but they're really just basic styles. Anyway, with this @ sign, this is something that is built into Next.js inside of the JS config, excuse me. And so in the jsconfig.json, you can set a base URL and you can also set paths. And inside of here, I can set @components to my components folder, @styles to my styles folder. If I wanted to have a utils folder, for example, I could do @utils, like this is in a utils folder. And what's cool about this is, let's just say you were to have a design system of some kind, and you were to say, okay, I want to be able to import like a certain button. And I did like design, or I'll do at buttons. And then I could do design system / buttons or whatever. This is very cool, because typically when you have to import something at any certain level, you might have to do .. / info button or something like that to be able to get the specific design system aspects that you want, or different components. By being able to do these kind of absolute imports and absolute paths, you're able to move around your components, and you don't have to break anything or fix any imports later because you broke something. This allows you to just do at components, and then again, inside of index.js, I do at components, and that gets me my footer. If I were to do some nested routes, I could do at components / whatever, and it would just work. And that part is so powerful, and I think it's so fun to be able to just do that and not have to add any extra loaders or configuration to be able to just run that. Now, I mentioned if you want to make a new route, you just make a new file in this way. You can also have different pages and folders. And so I could say, for example, Pokemon.js, and or not .js, this is a folder name. And I'll do Pokemon folder. And then inside of here, I could do a new file and say Pikachu.js. And then I'm just going to copy all of this inside of the Pikachu.js. I'll call it Pikachu again. And I'm just going to say, hello, Pikachu. If I were to save this and run this, I would end up going to localhost 3000 / Pokemon / Pikachu. And it will just work. And so folders work in the exact same way as files. Now, let's just say you want dynamic routes. You don't necessarily want to define every single Pokemon.js inside of this folder. What I could do, instead of having Pikachu.js, I could rename this to anything. And I could say Pika.js, or I'll just call it Poki.js. And I put it in square brackets here. Now, when I have square brackets, it will allow me to unlock even more things and actually find what I want on this page. And this is where there's two functions that come into play. And that is export async function, get static paths. And then there's another one, get static props. Now, what these two functions allow you to do is they allow you to programmatically define what these paths can be. So get static paths, I'm not going to do a full API call right here, but let's just say I was calling the Pokemon API. I could say, let Pokemon paths equals fetch, and I'll just do some Poke API like this. And let's just say I got all of the names of the Pokemon here. Then I can return paths, and then in this array, I could do Pokemon paths. And so now I will be able to go to /Pokemon /Pikachu again, but I can also go to /Pokemon /Charmander, or /Mew /Mewtwo, any of the Pokemon that I might want /Ditto, and it'll just work. And that's because I've pulled these in get static paths. Now, get static props is similar, only instead of getting paths and defining them here inside of the paths, what I can do is I can query any API, and it'll be passed as props to this page. And so let's just say I wanted to let blog posts equal fetch, and then some blog posts inside of here. Then I can return this props, and then I can just do props and then blog posts like this, and then those blog posts will be passed to this page. And so instead of hello Pikachu, I could do like hello and then blog posts, whatever is passed in there. Now, there's one last thing that I want to touch on with these dynamic routes. And you can actually use these on a regular route too. Like, let's just say I wanted to populate blog posts on my index.js. I could totally call those functions down here outside of this. But there's two different contexts here. Inside of these components, in this export default function for any of the pages in contact right here, in index right here, this is the browser context. And so all of the stuff in here will actually be running in the browser. But everything outside of it in these functions right here, this is Node. This is actually running on the server or running in the background, running at build time. And so, for example, if I were to do console.log whatever right here, this would be running in your terminal, or this would be running on the server. But then if I did it right here, this would run in the browser, in the server. And so it's funky. These are just React components, but in Next.js, page components have that kind of funky enhancement where they are React in the browser, but also there's Node on top of that as well. And so it makes for some really cool projects. And I'm actually going to show you one really quick. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a second, and I'll show you a quick demo so you can see what I'm talking about here. And so let me pull it up again, refresh the page, and then I'll share my screen again, and then we can get to some questions. Okay, 1 second. And sharing entire screen. Great. Okay, so this is a project that I made called Next Prank. So if you'd like to check it out, it's on my GitHub and /Next Pranks right here. And what this project does, if I open this in a new tab, is it has a home page. It is very, very plain. But then I could say Cassidy pranks core code or something like that. And this generates a URL. When I click it, it then rickrolls you. And so I'll not play that too much. But it's kind of a fun thing. And I know it's silly, but I'd love to talk about the technology behind it. Okay, so first of all, I've generated this new link. It takes in the actual URL right here that I generated from that homepage and makes a new URL. I use that get static props thing to take the URL and parse it into this title where it says Cassidy pranks core code. Not typically, it's something more like Cassidy saves the day or wins $1 million or something. And then it also updates the head of the page. And so if I were to view the page source, it changes the title of the page, which is exciting, but it also changes the meta tags like Cassidy pranks core code and stuff. And so let me show you how that works really quick. If I were to go to pages, I have the news and then this article.js. And again, it's using the brackets in the name. What I do is I call get static paths. Get static paths, it's just returning an empty array because it's a complete variable array. I don't need to pull in anything from an API. It's just going to be a completely variable array. Then in get static props, I'm getting the parameters from the URL, and I'm putting that to title case, and I'm passing that title to my component. And then we get to my component, which is article. It takes in the props that I pass in, and which is the title right here. We're getting title from props. This prank head, it's what's programmatically using the Next.js head API. It has this "you have been pranked," and then the title not. It's super silly. And really, this entire application is just that. It's this file, and it's the index.js. And that's this whole application where it's just a form that lets you generate pages, and that's it. And so that's one silly one that I wanted to show you. But then I wanted to show you a more robust one, and this one is called Next Adventure. Now, this Next Adventure application was one that I made on Halloween, so it's a little spooky. Watch out. And so it's called A Lonely Code-Filled Night. And it's a choose-your-own-adventure story. And so you can say get spooky, and it says, once upon a time, there was a developer named Ariana Venti who was working very late at night on Halloween. She wanted a snack. She decided to eat an apple. Turns out it was poison. It was never finished. Her last words were, "I wish I committed early and often in my repositories." It's silly, but you get it. Now, this is a choose-your-own-adventure story, but it also has another aspect of it where it lets you contribute a character. And so what I do in this application is I say, okay, I want to, and I zoomed in, so it should say your turn. I want to create a character, and so I might say that my character's name is Cassidy. She has her pronouns. She has her favorite smell. I add her email, and that sends it off to a Hasura database. And then when I click Get Spooky, you can see the developer is named Unicorn now. It populates the story randomly based on what's in the Hasura database. And so let me show you the code for this really quick. In the pages, I have these pages right here. And so first of all, in the index.js, that's what I just showed you, where it's the same header kind of as before, only I added some CSS. And then it has 2 links. And so this is using that next link component that I showed you before. And I can go to either make your own or to start. And I'm going to go to make your own first. In make your own, if you don't know how Netlify forms work, if you add Netlify is true to any HTML form, Netlify will automatically pull in the form data. And so I have this character form right here, which is what I showed you. And then, oh, GitHub, look at you. You're letting me navigate around like this. Okay, so this is my character form. I have this Netlify is true right here. And it lets me pull in my character name and all of these details right here, favorite smell, email, etc. Now, when I hit submit there, it queries a function. And again, I'm using Netlify. I work there, so sorry for the advertisement. But whenever I create a file called submissioncreated.js, that automatically runs when I submit a form. And so what I do is I parse the form and the payload data, and I add that to my Hasura database. And then my Hasura database, it's a GraphQL query. It sends it off, and then it adds that character to the database that can randomly populate the story. And then this get character is one that's run at the beginning that gets a random character for the story, and it pulls it again from Hasura to populate it. And then that populates the story. And this is my favorite part of it. I use XState for this application. And so I generate a state machine of all of the different states of the story. And so there's the first 2 values, then there's all the different levels. XState allows you to kind of map out what you want your story to be. And so I have a pronoun generator that I made that changes it to he, her, they, them, or anything. And so it goes through all of these different levels. And then at the very bottom, I create a state machine. And then with this state machine, I'm going to scroll back up. Sorry if I make you seasick. I put that in a context object. And then I pull a random character from my database, and I pass it to this context object. And if you'll remember, if you ever want to use context in Next.js, you put it in app.js. And so I wrap my entire application with this app context. And so I'm pulling the data from the database. I get the character for the story, and then I pass it to all of my routes. And then this is the last part that I wanted to touch on. Now this is even a funkier title name, this file name. It's in the brackets, so it's dynamic, but it also has a ... in there, a spread operator. So it's ... story. That means that as I navigate in the story, I'm going to click this for a second so you can see really quick. I'm going to answer the door. I have a really long route here, and it might be hard to see, but it goes /s/start/snack time/eat some candy, answer the door. I'm basically following the path of the story in the URL. And so because I do this ... story, that means anything at this route behind this S folder and then in story automatically gets filled. And so I don't have to make a bunch of different routes for it. And so I'm using my state machine to use this use router from Next.js to be able to push to the route as I navigate throughout the story. And so that's this application. It uses a bunch of dynamic routes. It's kind of fun. At least I had fun building it, and I hope you liked demoing it too. But anyway, that is a very, very high level of generally what you can do with Next.js. I hope you liked it, and I would love to take any and all questions. That way we can talk about it a little bit more.
Yes, that was amazing. I just want to bring one comment before Joseph gives a wrap up, because it was fun. Samantha is saying, watching Cassidy move through her code is the most satisfying thing ever. And I agree.
Thank you.
That being said, thank you, Joseph. Thank you, Cassidy. It was amazing. But now I'm going to pass the mic to Joseph.
That's amazing.
Okay, so I'm gonna make a quick round up. Well, first of all, thank you, Cassidy, for incredible presentation and this introduction to Next.js. It was awesome. I think what I liked the most was the optimization that the frameworks provides. I mean, the idea of static first, I think it was my favorite, as well as the hot reloading, because it brings so much features and improvements to your code and how your site is rendering. And well, I really like that, and I think that's awesome.
Yeah, it's so powerful. It's definitely some of my favorite parts of the framework too.
Cool. Now, do you guys like Joseph or Freddie have any questions, or we can start jumping with the questions from the audience?
Oh, well, I have a question. Well, Next.js has a state manager.
So it uses React. And so if you want to do any state management, you can use the typical React use reducer or use state. And then if you want to share it, you use context. There are some libraries that are kind of coming out. SWR is one of them that the Vercel team is pushing out. I know Recoil, some people have been trying to use Recoil with Next.js. Some people use Redux even. I personally just like using vanilla React. And so use state and use reducer is what I use for state management.
Perfect. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was just wondering how you manage your 404
Yeah, 404
pages.
pages. You make a 404.js inside the pages
Oh,
directory.
really?
That's it. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and so it has some defaults built in, and so it has a default 500 error and 400 error pages. So it'll just be the Next.js styled ones. But if you want to add your own style, flair, videos, anything like that to your error pages, it's just you make a 400 or a 404.js or a 500.js, and that's how it'll work.
Oh, nice, nice.
Yeah, it's nice and simple.
Yeah.
Awesome. I'm gonna jump with another question from Juan Luis Lopez. He's asking, what would be an easy rule of thumb to decide which components to build server side?
That's a good question. And I would say figure out what are your essential components, your essential pages, and do those static. And then everything else, do that server. Because the essential ones are the ones that, if you build it static, that means if something is going to go down, CDNs don't go down as often because of all the nodes that happen and stuff. So static pages are really great because you don't have to worry about some service going down here and there because it's pre-built. And so I have a friend, for example, she just launched a really big website. I think she used Next.js static sites, and she had a form on there, and it had 1,200 concurrent users filling out the form within like 2 minutes. And because she built it static first, she had no latency, she had no downtime, nothing went wrong. And that's just the power of doing that static first thing. If you wanted to do some kind of form thing like that, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it on the server because you're hitting that server so much. And so for server-side stuff, I would put that as non-essential as possible. And some people might disagree with me because, there's lots of opinions on the internet, but that's how I would do it.
Awesome. Any other question from our facilitators, or?
Yeah, just one more. Sorry about that.
Let's go. Go ahead.
Well, I saw something about Netlify. Can you tell me a little bit more about Netlify? What is?
Sure. Yeah, and so Netlify, that's where I work. So I'll try not to make this a full-on ad, but it's a great.
Go on.
But Netlify is a place to host websites, and it's a really fast, easy way to make websites. And so I host pretty much everything on Netlify, and I hosted on Netlify before I worked there too. It's actually my 1 year today at the company.
Right.
And so what's cool about Netlify, and again, very biased, but what we're trying to do with that incremental static regeneration feature that I told you about, where you build pages separately from like the core pages, but they're still static, we're working on making that a feature available to all frameworks, not just Next.js. When we actually just announced that this past week. And so it's still very new. We're still working on it, but you can look at the Netlify blog to learn about it. But that's something that I'm really excited about. But otherwise, if you want to use Next.js on Netlify, it works out of the box, and we have some plugins that automatically run things for you. And I've personally had no complaints with it. And so that's the high level on Netlify. You can host sites there, and if you really want to go deep on it, I'm happy to answer questions, but I don't want to make it a full-on app.
Yeah, cool. Congratulations on the first year. I just posted the link on the comments. If anyone wants to go and check Netlify out, go celebrate Netlify. Cool. I'm gonna go with some audience-based questions. Okay, let's go with Rodolfo Molina. He's actually also part of Core Code's programs. He's asking, is Next.js better than Gatsby, or it depends on what you're building?
It depends. It really, really depends. They both do really great things, and if you want to use React, you're gonna be doing well with both. It not only depends on what you're building, but it depends on your preferences. Because, for example, with Gatsby, there's such a wide plugin community, and their community is just honestly huge compared to Next.js, just because it's been around longer. And so if you said, for example, I want to pull in Instagram posts for a given user, there's a Gatsby plugin for that. You can just install it, put in the user, and it's done. With Next.js, they don't have plugins like that. They might have some open source repos here and there, but you would have to build a lot of that yourself. And so that's something to consider, where it's not necessarily a technology limitation, but a community limitation. Next.js does the server-side rendering things, and Gatsby doesn't. Gatsby is more static first than Next.js is. But you can do a lot of the same things with both. Gatsby really emphasizes GraphQL. Next.js doesn't care. And so it kind of depends on the opinions you have, how you want to build things, but you can really build a lot of the exact same things with both. And performance-wise, they both have their own different kinds of optimizations, and so you can't really go wrong with either. I will say that I've found people struggle with certain types of libraries with Next.js that work with Gatsby. For example, styled components. Styled components is a pain to get working on Next.js, but it just works on Gatsby. And meanwhile, there are some libraries that just work with Next.js that are a pain with Gatsby. You can't go wrong with either.
Awesome. Thank you, Cassidy. There's another question about a comparison. It's from Freddy Reyes. It says, does Create React app and Next.js do the same thing?
Yes and no. They kind of can, except again, Next.js does the static and server-side rendering aspects of it, and Create React app does client-side rendering. And so, for example, with single-page applications, you're going to want to use Create React app, because you can add React Router and add all these different pages and stuff, but that is where it's limited to one thing. That being said, it's also great for Create React app. You can make an entire React application live in a div. And so let's just say you had a gigantic application built with like Backbone or just something big in legacy, but you wanted to start converting things to React. You could very easily add React to different parts of your pages and slowly make it grow in the application. With Next.js, it's not as easy to do that because it expects you to define whole pages to make it work. And it's using React to make those pages. And so with Next.js and Create React app, I'd say depending on the project that you're doing, if you want to make a site with tons and tons of pages, you might want to use Next.js. If you want to use a more app type of thing where it's a single page app or just a few individual pages, Create React app might be good for you. They both have a lot of really nice developer experience things, and they both do a lot of the same things because they're built on React, but it's the way they render pages is different.
Cool. I'm curious if Joseph or Freddy has had any experience with Next.js or Create React app. Have you?
Yeah,
guys?
I haven't, but I have seen some videos and I really liked it. I was wondering also if Next.js has any utility to migrate a project from React to Next.js, or I mean, in a simple way, or you have to build the entire site.
Yeah. So the way you would do it is you would have to figure out your pages. The pages will be the biggest thing because typically, because Next.js is built with React, a lot of your components, like your buttons, your headers, that kind of stuff, that you can just copy and paste into a Next.js application into a components folder. But it's the individual pages themselves, like that index.js or an about.js or whatever, that is where you would have to do a bit more migration and construction of things. And so there's no guides for that. I should write one, actually, now that you've asked. That's something I should do. But typically that's how you do it. You would take all of the presentational things and smaller components and just plop it in. But the big pages you would have to construct yourselves individually.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Mhm.
Oh no, that's my comment. There's another question from Renato. He's also part of our core code programs. He's asking, how can Next.js help improve SEO?
Yeah, and so the SEO aspect is, first of all, server-side rendering and static are better for SEO than client-side, and so that's the short answer. But the more specific answer is, I showed you that next head thing where you can programmatically change the title and the meta tags and stuff. Next.js improves SEO in that regard. Where, for example, with that prank website that I showed you, I update the meta tags for every single prank article that's made. I update the title for every single thing that's made. And so when I share it, for example, on Twitter, it shows an actual Twitter card and it looks like a real website. And you can customize what your SEO meta tags and all those things are in Next.js without having to inject separate code, where something like, for example, Create React App, because it's client-side rendered and stuff, you would have to do some finagling to get code into the head of your application.
Interesting. There's another question here. It's from Andre Westerlund. Hope I'm saying that right. He's asking, is hooking up Next.js with a CMS a good idea?
It is a good idea. If you hook Next.js up with a CMS, you can make a very powerful SEO optimized static website. For example, I've been working with this one startup, and I just put together a Next.js website for them for their marketing page, and I used Prismic for it. Prismic was really easy to hook up because they have a JavaScript API that I was able to just query and pull posts. And I was able to get a fully optimized website running at build time and everything done in, I think, 2 days. It was really quick to be able to get all the hooking up done, all the content in, and then have the content team fill in the copy, whereas I just work on the code and stuff. And so it's a good idea, and it's luckily not too difficult as well.
Awesome. I'm gonna start jumping to questions about other topics. I just want to know if Joseph and Freddy have any other last questions on Next.js.
Yeah, I'm kind of wondering about the build or the deployment flow. Is there any difference when deploying a React app and also deploying a Next.js app?
I'm going to share my screen again really quick, and I'll show you just how easy it is.
Okay, let's go.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Okay. Share screen, pull up the window. If you want to deploy something to Netlify, you create a file called netlify.toml, and you add these 3 lines, and that's it.
Wow.
That's that is done. And then also, if you, it's nice and simple. And if you go to that URL that I shared with my Next starter, which I'll put it in the chat again, so that way people can see it. I'll put it in the host chat and you can post it in there. But in the README, there's a button that says deploy to Netlify. If you click it, it'll automatically clone the repo to your GitHub and deploy it to Netlify, and that'll be it. And then you can do whatever code changes you want and make it your own site, but it'll automatically be deployed, and whenever you push to main, it'll automatically deploy.
Wow.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, nice and simple.
Yeah, I already put the link on the comments. You should all check it out. Then we're gonna jump to the next type of questions. We're almost 5 minutes away from this. This went on so fast.
Oh my gosh, it went so fast.
Let's do it. Gustavo Quintana is asking, does your startup project has auth?
Yeah, and actually, I made a demo using Netlify Identity. Again, I'm not meaning to be an ad for Netlify.
Do it.
But yeah, let's do it. So Netlify has an open source auth library, and so I built an example with that, and it's on my GitHub somewhere. I can find some other ones, but auth is relatively simple with Next.js. And then also, I've really liked the database Supabase. SUPA base, Supabase. They have a lot of really nice Next.js starters where it allows you to do the authentication built in with it. And I asked the founders, and yes, it's named after the Nicki Minaj song.
Important.
Yeah, very important.
I love it. I love that. Awesome. We have a question from a non-developer, actually. Yes, spicy. He's asking how, because actually he texted me when you were speaking. He was like, I love everything she's saying. I don't understand what she's saying, but I love every project she's showing. And so I think this question is connected to that. He's asking, how would you say non-developers can best support developer projects like this?
That's a good question. And so I would say, first of all, if you want to learn how to code, you should, because it's fun. But also, if let's just say you have no interest in coding, that's just not your jam, but you want to support developer projects like this, there's a lot of ways where you can sponsor open source libraries, like Next.js is open source. You could go sponsor the repo there. Specifically for Netlify, we're trying to add a lot of different features, and we have some open source libraries for that, which actually, let me pull that up before I forget, and then I'll just paste it in the chat again. Where, for example, we're doing some funky optimizations for Next.js on our end, and I just pasted the repo in the chat for you to share it. And if you wanted to support that project, or even just tweeting about the project saying, hey, this is cool, more developers should contribute to this, for any repos, not just Netlify, not just Next.js, but for any of these open source projects, a lot of times developers, they need help to maintain things. Maintainers need help to keep their projects going. And some of the best pieces of help are getting more eyes on the project and just saying, yes, this is really a bug, or no, it's not. And just triaging those issues. Because I can't tell you, I actually used to work for the guys who make React Router. And whenever they had issues, they're just like, oh my gosh, there's like 100 new issues this week, and we don't know which ones are real or which ones are just people having trouble. Being the person that says, this is a real bug, just so you know, this is a real bug, just so you know, this is not, you can close it, is so helpful to those people. And so for any of these frameworks, for any open source projects, that is so helpful.
That's awesome. That's great information. I'm gonna jump with one last, not the last question, because in Core Code we have a last question, but for this last question, I'm just curious, because you're creating a lot of things, and lots of the things you're creating sound fun. My question would be, why do you create? Why do you like to create? Why do you want to create?
Oh, that is such a great question that I don't know how to answer.
They will keep you up at night.
Yeah, I know. Well, so I've always loved building things. In general, like growing up, I played with Legos, and I've always loved creating things, drawing things and stuff. And I found that coding and creating content with tech and stuff in this field, it's so nice and creative because I get to build things. I get to kind of combine math with art and creativity and cool things. And I love doing that. And it's so fun to be able to make something out of nothing. And to just see an idea that you have come to life. And for myself, I've gotten so much out of this tech industry of just the networking opportunities, being able to meet all of you, being able to speak here, being able to speak at events and travel and even just have the jobs that I've had. And I love being able to give back to the tech community. And so a lot of the things that I do is to just give to people because it's given so much to me.
That's a beautiful philosophy, and I think we've all experienced it. I was visiting like all your channels, and it looks and it sees, like I can see how people actually are very thankful to you for every single contribution you do to the community. So I'm also thankful for that. Now, before I get to the last question, I just want to tell you that if you're reading the chat, there's lots of love being sent here. Zach is saying, great product. Awesome that Cassidy is here speaking for Core Code. We have some wows there, some thank yous. And I think we're all super thankful for this presentation. Now, jumping to the last question of the night. We always ask for both our speakers, facilitator, and hosts to share a message. It's not a question, it's more like an invitation to share a message. Imagine this is the last network session you will have in your life, and you only get to share one message with the universe. What would it be? So any one of you can start. It can be any message about anything. Go.
Mine is a message that a mentor of mine gave to me once,
Mm.
and it's been something that really drives me. And the phrase is "lift as you climb," because as you're climbing your career ladder, as you're going up in your community, on social media, in your work, and in anything, there will be people behind you who want to do the exact same thing. And you should try to help lift them up and make it easier, because as you go up, you should be helping them go up too. And by doing that, you give back to the community in such a way that it's better for everyone in the long run. And you never know, as you give to people, what you might get in return. And you don't do it to get anything in return, but you do it because it's right. And some of the most amazing friendships, relationships, benefits, opportunities come out of giving back and lifting as you climb.
Good one.
Nice one. I want to share mine. So mine is not to be afraid of failures. And I think that's something I really like. And it comes from, I think I like a phrase from Bob Ross, which says it makes funny mistakes. They're not bad mistakes. They're just funny mistakes. I think
Your
that's a
happy
phrase.
accidents.
Happy accidents. Great. Yeah,
Funny mistakes.
yeah, almost. So yeah, I mean, don't be afraid of mess up.
Okay. Well, um, I love building things that help humanity. And well, my philosophy is that if you can build something that can save life of everybody, okay, do it. So I love to help people. Sometimes uh, I love to build tools or things that maybe nobody knows I build it, but it helps everybody. So if you can do it, just do it, and maybe someday it'll be save somebody's life. So that's my philosophy.
Wow. And I'm sure these philosophies are going to save lots of people's lives or spirits as well. Yeah, I just wanted to share one last comment. Oh my God, there was another question, but we're already on time. I just wanted to share this comment that Laura Castro said, and I lost it. Oh yeah, she said, that was so cool. Big motivation for me to keep learning to code.
Yay.
And I think, yeah, in my side also, just to wrap this up, I feel very, very blessed to be here today. And I also learned a lot, and I'm sure we're going to share this so more people can learn, both about the tech part and also about all these ideas of lifting others, of creating, of helping, of contributing, right? And that being said, it's a wrap.
Woo!
Yeah, and well, that's it. So see you all next time. If you want to know more about our events, you can subscribe or contact me, whatever, or contact us. See you soon. See you in the
See
next one.
you.
Thank you for having me.